Is agreeing to voter ID one of those compromises that you'd support?
I don't think that we should underestimate what that could mean. Because in some people's mind, that means, well, you're going to have to Xerox or photocopy your ID to send it in to prove you are who you are. Well, there are a whole lot of people, especially people who live in rural communities, who don't, there's no Kinko's, there's no Office Max near them. People have to understand that when we're talking about voter ID laws, be clear about who you have in mind and what would be required of them to prove who they are. Of course, people have to prove who they are, but not in a way that makes it almost impossible for them to prove who they are.
I like that little jingle you had at the end of it.
Ignore the commercial. David, I wanted to say.
Randomly comes out of Dane's butthole every now and again. David, he just has a little jingle.
I had things to say.
Please. I'm sure you'd have more to say than I do.
That, David, and ladies and gentlemen, in under a minute, is the towering intellect that is second in command to the most powerful country in the world. At least so we're told. That was Vice President Harris saying that people in rural communities are either too stupid, maybe that's a bit of a stretch for what she was saying, or we're too poor to be able to prove who they are in terms of voter ID. Basically, they can't photocopy their government issue IDs. David, that was a strange argument as far as I could tell.
My whole thing is like, if I have a government issued ID, shouldn't that be all I need to verify who I am? Why would I need a Xerox? Do I have to walk in with a Xerox copy of the thing that I'm going to show them in real life person?
Well,
but then she says, we don't need to make it any harder to prove who you are. It sounds like you're saying the exact opposite of what you've just been arguing about for a minute there.
Now,
I'm not the smartest man in the room, or in most rooms, or in a general vicinity. But what I will say is that sounded like a whole circle and then somebody slicing right down the middle of that circle that you made.
Now, I wanted to take it in a bit of a different direction. So you tell me what you think about this. You know, Please. If you like it, swing away. If you don't, throw it back in my face. Now, she specifically mentioned in there rural Americans. Now, I was told only white people could be racist and that you couldn't be racist towards white people from another group because it has something to do with power or whatever. Who knows? They change the definitions all the time. Anyway, she talked about rural Americans there, and last time I checked, you know, the 2020 census is about 78% of rural Americans happen to be white. So if she's concerned about rural Americans being able to photocopy their
This
ID,
would be the first time, by the way,
and not comply with voter ID laws, then does that mean that voter ID laws are not racist? If it's oppressing rural Americans, I guess is what I'm getting at here.
I don't know how to follow any logic within any of these logics because all the logic was gone from her logical analysis of that logic.
So to your point, at the end of the conversation, or at the end of the statement, people should have to prove who they are, but not if it's too difficult. And then I guess the follow-up question would be...
like, I can walk up to a line and just be like, trust me, I am who I say I am.
I guess the follow-up question would be...
I'm Superman.
Who or what...
I'm the Bat.
Who or what decides what is quote-unquote too difficult? Is it Kamala Harris alone who decides that? Is it her boss, President Biden? Is it Congress? Who decides what or what is not?
These same laws that they're fighting for in a video that we've referenced more than one time in this podcast, the Ari video, that these laws that they're pushing to help the communities they say they're helping actually turn out to be pretty ignorant laws and deprecating to the populace that they're quote unquote trying to help, but at the same time kind of shitting on for being not intelligent enough to help themselves.
So I don't know about you, David. You and I came from quote unquote rural communities. I'm sure
we were lucky to find our way in a wet paper bag, T-Wood. Make our way all the way down here. Where's
But-
one of these alligator?
Either we play Big City Boys on this podcast because we've seen it on TV, or we actually live in
I
big
play an
cities now.
intellectual on a podcast.
I don't know. Maybe we got smarter when we moved to South Florida. Maybe, who knows?
That seems to be not the case. If you read, if you're up
you
to
listen
date
to
on,
this podcast
if you're up to date
regularly.
on news broadcasts around the nation.
But I don't know. I guess if I had to put it into one emotion, I would just say that I'm sad, David. I'm sad that somebody of a room temperature IQ is the second and the next in line to lead the free world.
Oh please, please, District Attorney that convicted a bunch of innocent people, tell me what I can and can't do with my own intellect. Tell me I can't figure my way out of a wet paper bag.
Tell me that I'm so poor, my community can't even.
They can't even spill Xerox.
They can't even afford a Kinko's.
I know it starts with a Z. That's all I know. All right. You can take that to the bank,
So
Kamala.
with that, David, are you sufficiently both heartbroken and also amused?
Didn't break my heart. I'm too dumb to have my heart broke. I don't even have zero.
All right. Well, whatever kind of lesson we pull out of that little gem
Can we just
from
can we get to
VP Harris,
can we get to some real issues here?
should we get into some real stuff?
Let's get some meat.
Let's
Let's
get
get
into
some meat
some
on these
stuff.
bones.
Ladies and gentlemen,
We'll take that one again.
Wowzers.
Chuckleman.
Take
Shit. Kamala was right.
We are dumb.
We can't. Is we dumb?
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to podcast episode 52 of Weapons of Meme Destruction, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/52. You can also find it on any podcast catcher, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, etc., etc. You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction and you will be able to find us.
And in my co-host's defense, he did just drink a little bit of water before that. Probably got a little bit of it caught in his throat. It's an honest mistake.
Little choky uppy. So anyway, find us on all those platforms. Jump in the comment sections, throw us a like, share us, all that good YouTube algorithm jazz. Join the conversation because we want to have laughs and we want to figure out this crazy, crazy mixed up world we're in with you. So, David, today's episode, the topic is freedom in Cuba, or at least what we hope is the outcome of what's been going on since last weekend.
Didn't we try to do that in the Bay of Pigs?
Not we, as we've brought up on this episode, on this podcast.
Well,
many times.
you and I weren't alive
We
during
are
that
not our
time.
government.
We did not storm the beaches of Havana. Does Havana even have beaches? I'm pretty sure it's inland.
But I'm pretty sure that, the CIA came up with this harebrained scheme and was like, oh, by the way, at the 11th hour, we're just going to abandon all of the people that live there.
We don't
that
like
we
you anyway.
convinced,
We never really liked you anyway.
That's the American government, which
God
is a
bless
theme
you.
you'll hear throughout this
God
episode.
bless your souls. Anyway, so yes, we've and if you live down
Are
in
we abreast of
Florida,
the situation?
if you live down in Florida, like we do, you're pretty abreast of all the Cuban sentiment and population down here because it is pretty prevailing down here.
Yes.
Ooh, it's a nice little.
And if any of
alliteration.
the listeners, and if you're not, you should definitely drop us a comment on one of those other social medias and get my Facebook name, handle, whatever. You will see, that weapons of meme destruction in general, to start off the episode on a little more serious note, have complete and absolute solidarity with the Cuban people, both living in Cuba and also the Cuban population in South Florida, where we live.
But Dane, are we just saying that because we're a figurehead, just like CNN does, just like MSNBC and Fox News does, before they completely obliterate what they're actually protesting for?
Yeah, we're totally SJWing right now. But anyway, yes, solidarity for what the Cuban people are trying to achieve in Cuba. Nothing but the uttermost hope and well wishes sent their way that actually happens. And as you'll hear at the end of the episode, we wish we could do more. But this episode is going to transition into 3 phases. We're going to talk about the cathedral's messaging of the whole situation. Basically, what your socialist, communist, American lefties think about the situation. And then finally, what we would like to do about it. So, with that being said, let's jump in. If this is news to you, please exit your home under that rock and move into one that's a little more.
Yeah, Patrick from SpongeBob.
So if you hadn't heard, since it's been going on for about a week at the recording of this episode, the people in Cuba have been protesting against the Cuban government. Food is low, medicine is low, and just generally speaking, it has come to a boiling point in Cuba for basically how deprived the population is there at the hands of the Cuban regime. Now, to the first point of today's episode, what does the American cathedral have to say about this? Well, let's start by reading you a New York Times quote.
I'm sure they're full of heart.
A New York Times tweet about the Cuban uprising that. And this tweet was, I think, 24 to 48 hours after it all started. So the New York Times says, quote, shouting freedom and other anti-government slogans, hundreds of Cubans took to the street in cities around the country on Sunday to protest food and medicine shortages in a remarkable eruption of discontent not seen in nearly 30 years. So, David, you got anything that jumps out to you from that tweet about
Say the first part.
Thinks?
Say the first part again.
Shouting "quote unquote" freedom and other anti-government slogans, hundreds of Cubans took to the streets.
I'm good. Just in case anybody that was listening missed that first part, maybe they pressed back real quick and got it again while they were done shouting at the person that just cut them off in traffic. Freedom and other anti-government phrases. That's a very interesting. If that's not them accidentally letting their true fallacies be known,
the true feeling, the true sentiments.
Well, the fallacy of logic is that they didn't know that saying that people that were protesting, shouting freedom against a government that has been, i.e., strangling that freedom from them to a point where the people in government are the only ones that have an actual life down there, to where, you know, the population has to scrounge and do all this, to where they can't even afford to feed themselves anymore. On a regime, on a statistic, on an ideal, like, it's not too far removed from like where we're at now, is it? I mean, freedom should not sound like a 4-letter word to your government in the land of the free and the home of the brave, right?
Well, I have 2 things to say about this tweet. And the first one is I want to do kind of like the Stewie thing from Family about the compliment sandwich.
Family Guy?
Yeah, from Family Guy. You know, you want to start out with something that they need improvement on, something that they did good, and then something
it's a shit sandwich. You compliment them, then you shit on them, then you compliment them.
Right.
The compliments are the bread, and the shit is the criticism.
So here's something they could do a little bit better. So I'm sure if you've spent any time reading headlines from the cathedral, and in particular the media portion of the cathedral, whether it be, in this case, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, Time Magazine.
You want to define the cathedral real quick?
Yes. For the new listeners, the cathedral is this basic control structure.
Synergistic control structure.
Across a wide range of society. So, for example, why would, just in the abstract, why would the power center in Hollywood, in Washington, D.C., in mainstream media news, and World Health Organization, not the World Health Organization, but public health, organizations all around the world. Why would all at the same time, these completely disparate sections of society, right? Politics, entertainment,
All agree on the same
journalism, etc.
principles.
Why would they all have the same opinion at the same time and express it with almost the exact same words? That's the cathedral. And that class of our betters, the intelligentsia, those who know how to live our lives better than us, the ones that form the opinion, they mold it to what they want the conclusions to be. Why would that group in those different parts of society seem to agree at the same time? So when we say cathedral, that's a shorthand for that. It's a weird phenomena, at the very least, that when everybody starts shouting the same thing from 8 different corners of society, maybe your ears should perk up and listen a little bit. So when the cathedral comes out, and again, starting this sandwich back over from the top,
Please.
thank you, is where could they improve? Where you could improve, media portion of the cathedral, is maybe not linking the concept of freedom or questioning your government with white supremacy, Nazism, et cetera, et cetera.
Connotation. Basically a connotation.
Right.
Freedom should be a good thing.
Right. The mainstream media in particular has been spending the better part of the last 14 to 15 months telling you that freedom is synonymous with selfishness, that desiring freedom is secret, underhanded white supremacy, that freedom is basically just a synonym for all kinds of bad things in society.
Freedom spreads the disease. Freedom spreads corona. Freedom kills grandma.
Now, this same portion of the cathedral will tell you, just look back at January 6th, that being anti-government is inherently a bad thing. Who cares what your motives are? If you distrust the government, then that's a bad thing. So here's what you can improve on, media portion of the cathedral, is maybe in the land of the free and the home of the brave, you don't spend an inordinate amount of time trying to equate these things in the populace's mind that freedom is a bad thing, that it's an undesirable thing, that it's an anti-American thing.
It's an international anthem. It's like all that we say that we blow shit up on 4th of July, i.e. fireworks, because of freedom. Like, we think that we have the freedom to drink 64 ounces of Coca-Cola each and every day because that's our right as an American citizen, and we are devoid of any, consequences therein too. Like, we are free, but are we? Because we keep running into these narratives that we keep telling ourselves that we're free and that we're brave. But every time there's a narrative that even ruffles your feather in the slightest, we have to give up a freedom to feel safer. So are we free and are we brave? The last big one that we had was 9/11, and I think we've covered that in magnitude about the Patriot Act being the most unpatriotic thing that's ever existed, and our willingness to adhere to it being the most cowardice thing that we ever could do.
Well, whether we are truly free or not, we'll get into the rest of the episode. But for now, just let it
ruminate. Let it marinate.
We're trying to help the media portion of the cathedral out.
Please.
We're trying to say,
don't be so on the nose.
If you're gonna write your titles and you're gonna have your rhetoric flowing throughout your articles and you're gonna have your media personalities and
propaganda.
Your celebrities
Can we just
go
call
out
it propaganda?
and sloganeer.
Propaganda.
Maybe the direction you don't want to go in the land of the free is that freedom is inherently suspect and something that the populace should not want.
Right.
Just not that. Now, the good portion of the sandwich. Something that they did good.
So this is the lower half.
This is
of
the middle
shit sandwich.
No, this is the middle. This is something that they did good.
Well, you're not making it.
I'm doing the sandwich backwards.
You're making a shit sandwich.
Yes, with the good stuff in the middle.
You're making like a KFC double down sandwich, but it's like shit as the double down. Go ahead. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you're doing.
Anyway, the good thing in the middle.
Go ahead, please.
Is that Yeah, I mean, technically speaking, yes, freedom is anti-government. They are correct in that regard. I have a feeling that's not the way they meant it.
I feel like they closed their eyes and swung hard and hit a fucking lucky ass double off the wall.
I have a feeling that they weren't exactly putting that proposition forth in a positive manner.
Option B, the sun was in the center fielder's eyes and it pings off his fucking head and they make it at third base because they were really lucky on the circumstance.
I mean, but yeah, freedom is anti-government. So good on you. That's...
A broken clock's right twice a day.
That's right.
A blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again.
You did good. You did good, kids. You
now
did
back
real
to the shit bottom of this shit bread shit sandwich.
Now,
This double down sandwich of shit.
something else that
Is KFC sponsoring us, by the way, for this episode?
But they
Damn
definitely should, because you
Damn
said
it.
their name enough times.
Colonel, get on it. You're racist. You're against freedom.
So the second thing that the media portion of the cathedral could work on is just narrative forming in and of itself. Now, this wasn't in this specific tweet, but the New York Times and I believe CNN and probably a couple others had some form of the following. The people in Cuba, one of the main things that they're protesting is a lack of COVID vaccines. That's what they're meant. Because when the people of Cuba are out on the streets saying no comuniso, now listen, I've only been on my Duolingo grind for about 2 weeks recently. I'm pretty good. I go for like 3 weeks and then I fall off the wagon for 12 months and then I'm back on. Anyway, been on my Duolingo recently, and I'm pretty sure that no comuniso doesn't mean let's bring in some more vaccines. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm only on like level 9. I'm pretty sure that's not what that means.
I listen to a lot of reggaeton, okay? And I've never heard comuniso once mentioned. So I feel like...
Which, by the way, we're probably mispronouncing because we're just a couple of gringos, but...
Como estaba rica? Bounce. Like, that's basically what I listen to.
Okay. But anyway,
Most of the time
a non-native speaker that's just trying to learn.
Keep placating this.
I would imagine that most of the people in Cuba are not upset about COVID-19 vaccines. It's my guess. I'm throwing that out there.
I'd be like we've mentioned a lot of times in previous episodes. Just go back and click on any of the COVID ones. We've said multiple times, COVID-19, you've got around a 1% chance of dying from it, but you have definitely 100% chance of dying of starvation.
Okay,
so if you can't get
this
the
wasn't
food,
going to be a COVID episode.
You just mentioned the vaccine, so you broke your own rule.
No,
you
they
broke your own. No, they did. So you're not. Oh, you should cry out for government, Dane. You're really good at passing the buck down the line. Anyway, to bring up the vaccine is to bring up COVID, is to bring up the entire issue. All that we're saying is like, if I was going to protest something, it would be the fact that I can't eat or can't afford food before I'd be able to be like, I can't afford to get this disease that I have a 1% chance of dying from.
So,
just applying logic and reason to this particular problem.
Ladies and gentlemen of the
supposed jury,
esteemed media, those are our humble suggestions to you. Fix the two things on the end. Be a little bit more like freedom's a good thing, and be a little less douchey and trying to, fly cover for communist regimes and saying that it's just about COVID vaccines and not the 62 plus years of starvation, subjugation, and oppression.
Why are we flying cover for a communistic regime? Aren't we supposed to be fighting communism? Because isn't that our antithesis?
No, David, because don't you understand that all communists, regardless of the 200 million deaths they were responsible for in the 20th century, they had good intentions. And it's only evil, greedy, terrible capitalists that are truly malevolent. And so every death that they're responsible for is totally accounted for. But the communist deaths, not so much.
American to say. It sounds a little bit like the American narrative isn't being hearkened back to us by the people that are supposed to be leading America. That's what I would say. That's the truly troubling thing here, is that the people that are supposed to be guiding us are saying a bunch of things that go against our national decree of what we truly are. And that's the really scary and sobering feeling here, is that they're taking a problem in someone else's country and pointing it directly in our face. They're not concerned with whether or not the people of Cuba are free, because God knows it's not like we fought a war back in the 60s to stop the spread of communism. It's not like we did that at all.
Several wars.
It's not like we did that at all.
Yeah.
But now, only 40 years later, 50 years later, plus a couple of years, I'm not good at math. Now we're starting to take the side of communism? Doesn't that sound a little weird to your ear?
I mean, or at least be communist sympathetic. But, if I could sum up section 1 of episode 52, it's cathedral, and in particular, media portion of the cathedral, do better. Okay? Do better.
Stop being red.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what's part 2 or 3? I thought we were on 3, but
Number
we're on
2.
D.
Now, the American left, and in particular the more radical left you go, the more deafening the silence becomes, has been MIA during this entire situation. You have heard neither hide nor hair out of the AOCs and Bernie Sanders of the world. But where you have heard some from some, you have the official Twitter account of BLM. And again, this isn't just BLM. This is the left political side of the spectrum in the United States in particular. It's all the U.S.'s embargo's fault. That's why the people of Cuba are suffering. It has nothing to do with the regime, has nothing to do with 62 years of control by Castro. And now, I mean, yes, Castro is not leading the country, but let's be honest, Raul Castro is still calling the shots in Cuba.
Can we...
With that being said, it has nothing to do with them. It's just the United States and their embargo, which again is also 62 years old.
That's
100% of the reason why the Cuban people are suffering, according to the American left.
Well, isn't that the whole thing, is that we didn't want to make it easy for Cuba to be communist? Like, we wanted to stop the spread of communism for the spread of democracy. And that's why we committed to the embargo. And if they would have moved away from communism, we would have dropped the embargo, because it was a different of an ideology. So it's like, okay, you don't want to live under my rules of the house, that's fine, but you either have to start paying rent or you have to go pay your own rent in your own house. That seems only logical, right?
Well, you are correct in that you're giving the side of the argument that was pro-embargo and still remains pro-embargo today. That's exactly what they would say, yes.
Correct.
They would say, this is a good policy idea because it's going to choke off the regime. And by choking off the regime, we make the Cuban people say, hey, this regime ain't so good. And they overthrow them and communism goes away. Yes, that is what they would say.
And then if we can just bring it back macular, if there's protests in the street.
Generation.
Macro. Let's go macro. That's what I meant.
I knew you did.
I'm pretty sure they
escape with that one.
Well, fuck you. I made it. You know what? Next time you choke on your own goddamn words, I won't make up a bullshit water drinking scenario. All right? How about that? I lied to you, people.
Good man.
I lied to you. Anyway, and I beg your apology. Anywho, like, that's the whole point. If you're protesting in the streets, it's not going so great. So it seems like that's what was following our line of logic, which means this is the time we need to be come back to the fold, my little what's the name of that parable in Catholicism? The son, prodigal son. Come back. We'll offer you all the I've blocked it out of my mind along with all those years of altar boying. Anywho. Repressed memories are a thing. Look it up. Anyway, that's the whole point. It's like, now's the time to open our bosom and be like, you know what? Come to freedom. Come to Papa.
Now, So obviously the American left
The long
cannot,
game, the long game sufficed. Is all I'm saying. Like we played the right role. Now we need to.
obviously the American left can't put any blame on the regime because they're calling for very similar things here in the United States. Now, again, don't accuse me or the podcast of straw manning or anything like that. When, for example, AOC puts forward the Green New Deal, she is in no uncertain terms saying that a substantial portion of the American population cannot make their own decisions, because if they do, they'll make bad decisions and that will contribute to climate change and institutional racism and the laundry list
So
of
the
things.
smart people have to be
and
able
the
to tell the dumb
laundry li-
people what they can do.
The laundry list of things that she's upset about. So she wants control, as David just said, wants government agency X, Y, or Z to control A, B, and C. And so central command and control is the way to go. Now, does that mean she wants to starve everybody out and act like the Castros? We don't have to say that. But we would say that her model of quote unquote good governance trends more towards the Castro side of the political spectrum as opposed to the, laissez-faire free trade side of the political spectrum.
And she got all this expertise through like years and years of economical study and going to Oxford and really getting into the nitty-gritty of economics, or is she just a bartender?
I mean, she does have an undergrad degree in economics, but I think that's
wicked awesome. An undergrad degree.
I posit that speaks more poorly on Boston University's quality control than it does.
I think her whole thing that got her nominated was that she was just a simple bartender from Brooklyn.
From the Bronx.
From the Bronx. Oh, excuse me. One of the B's.
She was Jenny from the block. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
She was the political Jenny. But
and now all of a sudden she's got all these great ideas. Well, and again, it harkens back. We discussed it before on the podcast. Like all of a sudden you're elected to an office and now you're an expert on legitimately everything, and you can talk to and tell all these dumb people all the things that they should do because you're smarter than them. That's all I'm saying. She's coming up with all these good ideas, but she's not an expert on any of them.
Okay, but we're not making point 2 of this episode about
I'm
AOC.
not making point. No. I'm just.
We are saying
it's an
is
overarching ideal.
Correct. She is emblematic of the American left. And I mean, let's be honest. Like she would posit herself as this, and many in the democratic, power structure within the DNC would say and did say, I believe the head of the DNC said when she first got elected that she was the future of the Democratic Party. So, we're not trying to posit some fringe political figure or left-wing activist to say like this is emblematic of the whole group. Like a lot of people on the American political left look to the Bernie Sanders and the AOCs of the world as, yes, they got it figured out. We need to go in their direction politically. If moving the Overton window as far left as they want to is valid and justified. But the key takeaway I would like you, dear listener, to take away from the second portion of the episode is when somebody says embargo, 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 and nothing about the regime, A, that tells you something about their motives. But B, we would like you to think that you can hold both views simultaneously and be consistent with pro-freedom. You can say the embargo is a stupid, counterproductive, bad idea that the United States government shouldn't be engaging in. And you can say the Castro regime has been engaging in 6 decades worth of oppression and, preventing the people from working and starving them and withholding medical supplies and everything, and say, yeah, they have to go too. And you can hold both positions and be consistently pro-freedom. But when you only point out embargo, 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 and have nothing to say about the regime, that betrays your motives.
Or option B.
And you should be called out for that, which...
If I can just add on to it, or like we said, have an overarching structure on this. Just because somebody is a politician and just because somebody has a camera in their face does not make them more of an expert on something than any one of us are an expert on something. They are not smarter than us. They are an extension of us. And that always has to be remembered. Just because McConnell's been there for 25 years doesn't mean that he knows more about economics than you do. just keep going forward with that. Just because they're on TV does not make them more of an expert than you. Make your own logical reasons, come to your own conclusions, do your own research. Which I'd argue that most of them don't do. They hire other people to do it for them.
Now, you might be saying, dear listener, all right, typical weapons of meme destruction fashion. You guys have had a whole bunch of complaints about everybody else. What are you going to do about it?
Let's solve this mystery. Let's put it to bed. Let's close this cold case.
If you were kings for a day,
I've got an idea. Dane, let's stop the podcast right now. We're going to go downstairs. We're going to make 1,000 PB&Js. We're going to hop in our boat that we totally don't have. We're going to drive right down to Cuba, and we're going to hand out goodwill from America, from our own kitchen, from D&D's kitchen, from Weapons of Meme Destruction's kitchen. Just PB&Js as far as the eye can see. Just a plethora of PB&Js for the Cubanas.
So
to fight for their freedom.
David's kind of alluding to what we would do if we were kings for a day. But we feel like, or maybe I feel like, maybe I have the guilt. David, you can join in on my guilt if you choose. We've spent a good portion of this episode saying how dumb the lefties are and how they're completely missing this whole thing. I do want to throw some shade at the Republicans. I want to throw some shade at the righties. Can we do that too?
Why would we not go down swinging?
Let's
swing at both people there.
Everybody hates us already, so let's make them hate us.
Why would we pull it back now? Let's go out in a blaze of glory.
So, and again, if AOC is emblematic of the left and what we had to say in point 2, then just call Miami Mayor Francis Suarez emblematic of the right.
Where are you going
now,
with this?
This kind of goes back to I think it's Tom Woods. I think it's a Woods law, and I forget which number it is. But the law is no matter who you vote for, you always wind up with John McCain. And the point of that is they're going to be a war hawk. They're going to want to be all engaged in interventionism, and they think that everything is solved with bombs. So Francis Suarez said that in almost exact word-for-word terms.
Isn't improved by bombs.
So
you name me one. A social gala?
I believe, bombs. And this is me paraphrasing, I believe he said something to the effect of
Thanksgiving bombs.
In terms of intervention, everything should be on the table.
Christmas Day.
Up to and including bombing the Cuban regime on behalf of
the president you think is a PS5 bomb.
Now,
boom. So much better.
I don't remember if he's currently, not Suarez. Suarez is the mayor of Miami. I don't know if Carlos Curbelo is currently a sitting representative, but at one point he was a United States representative. And he basically echoed Suarez's sentiments to say he didn't mention bombing specifically, but said that, everything should be on the table. Now, Republicans, God, that's just terrible. I mean, if you've spent any time listening to the first 51 episodes of this podcast, or, even have a schoolhouse
one of them,
even have a schoolhouse rock level of understanding about American history, the American intervention, and especially the flavor that has to do with bombings, has been hopelessly pathetic for the last at least 60, 70 years. Everywhere we bombs drop, whatever problem we were there to solve gets worse.
In fact, I mean, sometimes it comes home, and the last time it came home was 9/11. And then they used that 9/11 to go off and do what? Drop more bombs.
Yeah.
So now we've got a whole new generation of people that, have animosity towards the American folk because they thought that we'll just bomb them into submission. Well, it works on paper, not so much in practicum. So, Dane, let's come up with the strategic bombing plan for Cuba. We're just going to bomb the capital and expect nobody else to go, hey, you maybe shouldn't have done that.
No collateral damage, no loss of historical sites.
No loss of political structure within the globe, no, like, you just did this for your own personal gain, indictments from the rest of the countries and the entire world, because we're the only country in the world, right?
Yeah, I mean, we are Team America World Police.
We are the free and home of the Whopper. Okay.
So yes, and sorry if we lost you there for a second, but yes, we still are under the umbrella of what Kings Dane and David for a day would do. But we just, we had to throw that out there because that's an absurd consideration to even have at this point, not only in this situation, but in light of America's history. But what would Dane and David do? David kind of alluded to it. If we had a boat, make a bunch of PB&Js and start driving the PB&Js down there to Cuba. Now, it's interesting because there have been some reports of some South Florida, Miami residents that have private boats were going to basically have a flotilla going down to Cuba and giving medicine and supplies, food, things like that, to the Cuban people. Now, I guess that sounds as good as far as it goes, and it would really kind of put the Cuban regime on their back heels if they're saying, hey, these aren't government affiliated people. These are private citizens that are just trying to give food and medicine to other people. That would kind of put them on their back heels.
Oh, waiting for a caveat, Dane.
No?
Seems like there's something coming down the pipe.
I mean, it would be nice if King and Dane and David were able to do that for a day. However, there's a little something standing in the way. It's a little something called Proclamation 6867, which was an executive order by Bill Clinton back in 96, which is still valid, which basically said that, as a matter of national security to the United States, because we don't want to inflame passions with the Cuban government, American private citizens were prevented from loading up things like food and medicine into their private boats and driving down to Cuba and giving it to people. So, yes, you're hearing that right. The government of the land of the free and home of the brave have made it illegal for its allegedly free citizens to do something free in terms of helping out people from another oppressed regime and from being brave in doing so. So, yeah, government sucks.
It seems like you were sold like the McDonald's thing, like ba-da-ba-ba-ba, I'm loving it. Like ba-da-ba-ba-ba, this is clogging my arteries and I think I'm gonna die early of cancer. Like, that's kind of the whole thing. It's like we're the land of the free and the home of the brave. No, we're the land of the controlled and home of the scared right now. Like, you think you can do things until all of a sudden you're not vaccinated. You think you can do things all the way until they tell you, no, you're flying in the ordinance of helping out your fellow man that you support with your own work, funds, and delivery system. That's actually illegal in our free society to do that because you believe in something that somebody else is doing. No, that's illegal. We'll throw you in jail. And like, again, it's like, and again, it's not against the country. It's against the people running it. It's against the people that are trying to get us to do this. It always goes back to Capitol Hill. It always goes back to the people sitting on those thrones telling you yay or nay, telling you how to think, what to think, and when to think it. Like, that's the problem.
And I mean, here's the thing, and we've brought this up in several episodes talking about voting and all that kind of stuff, is, yes, that was an executive order under Clinton, but Bush, Obama, and Trump all issued their own executive orders, which continued Bill Clinton's 1996
If you
order.
lost count, it's Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican.
So it didn't matter which party it was coming from. And again, this is to Tom Woods' point. No matter who you vote for, you wind up with John McCain. That doesn't just apply in the context of foreign policy. It's that there is really no substantive variation between presidential administrations between Republicans and Democrats, is that no matter who you vote for, you're going to get the same general smorgasbord of policies. But here's the thing. Trump was this evil, fascist, terrible, unique anomaly from all of his predecessors. And Biden was a return to normal, quote unquote, build back better, all of that kind of stuff. And here's the key point. These are executive orders. There is no legislation required. There is nothing for Biden saying the Senate's being obstructionist, we got to end the filibuster. There's nothing, absolutely zero stopping Biden. As previous executive orders under which people are supposed to, of course, act accordingly, Biden can right now, today, in his own hand, write an executive order which revokes all the previous and allows private American citizens with their own boats taking their own risks and their own supplies and their own resources and helping out people in an oppressed regime of another country. He could do that with a stroke of a pen. If you remember Obama's famous quote from his presidency, "I don't need Congress, I have a pen and a phone." That dictatorial proclamation was cheered at the time. And yet Biden, who was a build back better, return to normal antithesis of Trump, can stroke his pen and pick up his phone, and American citizens won't be prosecuted for helping out other people. And yet here we sit.
Would only tell me, with all that you just said, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to help these people out. He doesn't want to gain another country as an ally. He doesn't want to gain this. That's it.
That's it. So we all have it pretty bad.
But don't protest for
Although
freedom.
some of us have
By
it worse than
God,
others.
that's like the worst thing to protest for.
So,
is
Weapons of
freedom.
Meme Destruction, podcast episode 52 can be found at wmdpodcast.com/52. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I'm forgetting one. YouTube.
Doesn't matter. Wherever you look for us,
Do all that
you'll
stuff.
find us.
And come back and check us out in next week for episode 53.